Good evening. Let me welcome you to this evening's presentation of Mango Tree Dialogues. As you know, Mango Tree Dialogues is a forum in which we discuss the issues of the day, uh, internationally, and especially with regard to the Jamaican diaspora and matters that are happening in Jamaica, issues facing the country at different times, and of course here in America. I would just like to say before I go any further that I know that there are times when you're not able to join me live, and I can understand. We are very busy, and life is very demanding. So I can appreciate if you're not able to join me live, like we're on here now. But just to remind you that you can always go to the channel, Mango Tree Dialogues, and pick it up on the live stream there. And when you do that, just share it with somebody else. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please take a minute, if that much, to just subscribe so that we can keep the thing going. All right. Now, before I go into the main issues that I want to talk about this evening, my wife was mentioning to me something about microwaving uh, food in plastic containers. And I thought it would be a good idea just for me to mention. I think you might probably know about it already because people have become very conscious about health in these days. But I thought it would be a good thing to just mention and just to urge us that what they call microplastics, little, well, the word micro, is microscopic. You cannot see it with the naked eye. But these particles on plastic containers break off into the things that are being stored in these plastic containers. For example, if we all of us use water bottles, and there is a possibility that over time that the plastic can uh, dissolve very small portions of it, and then over time, these things don't happen immediately or in the short term, but over time, they can begin to affect the functioning of our bodies. But especially for microwaving, with all that intense heat, you imagine in 2 minutes, you can heat up a good amount of food, and the intensity of the heat that goes into that. The possibility of the plastic container that you use being dissolved over time inside the food is very real. As a matter of fact, health authorities have called some alarm, to this particular practice. I would like to urge you. And I'm urging you because this is what we do. Use a glass container or an enamel container, but never plastic. Never put plastic containers in your microwave. All right. So for all that is worth, just to urge you to be very careful about that. All right. Well, for the topics that I want to talk about this evening, there are two things that have been on my mind. And one of them concerns the reform of the United Nations, especially with regard to the awesome responsibility that has been given to the 5 permanent members of the body. All right, so I want to share some words on that, and because today was the farewell address of President Biden to that body. He's going to be leaving office, having handed over to Kamala Harris, and she's been doing such a spectacular work since that. But he attended the United Nations today, as his last hurrah, so to speak. And then later on, secondarily, I want to say something about the absence of the voice of civil society in light of the atrocities that have been done and that are being spoken by the leading presidential candidate in the Republican Party. I don't have to call his name. You know who he is. And to say something about the dangerous trend that I see has arisen, because so many voices are silent in what is one of the most, if not the most consequential elections that we will ever face in our lifetime in this country. We're almost at an inflection point. We're almost at an existential crisis when we can have a situation in which someone of that caliber, someone of that persuasion, can be neck and neck with a very prominent and very competent opponent for the presidency of the United States. It boggles the mind. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But, you notice I'm almost into it already. Because, it is something that is very concerning to me. And ought to be to all well-thinking people, not just in America, but right around the world. As a matter of fact, I tend to think sometimes that people around the world are more concerned about Trump running for the presidency and being so close to it than many Americans seem to be concerned. Well, anyway, as I said, I'll come back to that. But let me go to Biden at the UN, because he gave that farewell address, a very poignant address, touching all the right buttons in terms of where the world is, where he sees the world, where he perceives it could be heading, and certainly America's role in cauterizing a lot of the things that are happening. He said something significant, and it is not the first time that he has said that. He said that we must resist at all times the attempt to engage each other in war. The nations of the world must do whatever in their power not to engage each other in war, but diplomacy, to try to work things out. And that may sound a bit fanciful in a time like this, when there is all kinds of urges and this kind of passion for strongman behavior and so on, that where people, even in their own personal lives, do not think that they can sit down and work out things and pacify things and make for peace. When you talk to somebody about making peace nowadays, you sound like a Pollyanna. But he sounded the right note. And he made that appeal against the background of the world in turmoil. Many people do not seem to understand that we are at a most dangerous stage in the history of human civilization in this century. Look at it, we are just 24 years into this century. Still under the first 25 years, still under the first quarter of the century. And the whole world, since the dawn of the century, seems to be moving in a direction of self-annihilation, moving in a direction in which we seem to be at daggers drawn with each other, not knowing how to resolve conflicts. Yes, Biden spoke against the background of a world that is convulsing. Of course, he's talking against the background of the continued problem between Ukraine, war between Ukraine and Russia, spawned by Russia itself. An unnecessary war, never had to be engaged, but because of one strong man's appetite for power and world dominance. He had also at the back of his mind what is happening with China in this South China Sea. Because China is kind of quiet now, but they're quiet because they're going through all kinds of economic problems. The central bank just recently they put out some stimulus measures. It's like stimulus and steroids in order to jumpstart the economy because the economy has been sputtering. So Xi Jinping doesn't have the capacity right now to wage any war because he is in trouble at home. Many young people who cannot find jobs. The whole property market is tanking. And that is why they have to come up with these stimulus measures to see if they can, get things back on track. Because back in the day, it wasn't long ago that China was just humming. But now that they're in serious crisis. So Xi doesn't have an option for war right now. But you better believe that it is still in his heart. And as soon as things are corrected at home, and so far as if he's free, no, you can bet that he's gonna be back at his game. And of course, there's a conflict in Israel between Israel now and Hezbollah, still with the Hamas. They have degraded Hamas to a point now that they felt that they could take on Hezbollah. And after having degraded Hamas in Gaza, they tested their power and tested the world in the West Bank. And now they have turned their eyes on Hezbollah in Lebanon. I have said on this broadcast on many occasions that Netanyahu, I was going to say Putin, but it would be the same difference, that Netanyahu is engaging and prolonging these wars because he wants to save his legal hide. Because the moment that these things are settled and people and the Israelis have elections, he's going to have to face his day in court. And he could very well find himself in jail. But anyway, that aside. But right now, the whole Middle East is convulsed, is getting to a point of convulsion where other countries could be pulled into this conflict. And so when Biden spoke about the need for us to engage diplomacy instead of, badmanism, to put it that way, he's on to the right track. But, and so he gave a good speech, in my view. And he's going to be remembered as a statesman, an international statesman, a man who has sought to seek peace, a man who has restored the integrity of American diplomacy on the world stage after it was totally decimated, in my view, by Trump. A man who is admired because people can trust him. His leadership can be trusted. Not so with others. World leaders, knowing that if Biden says it, it will be so. But they are a little diffident still because of what could come down in the elections in November if Trump wins. So I said, well done, Biden. You've been a statesman and you have done this country proud. And now that you're almost now in the sunset of your leadership of this country, we here at Mango Tree Dialogues would like to wish you well. Now to the matter of the reform of the United Nations. When the United Nations was formed after the Second World War, there were various organizations that were formed within it, like the World Health Organization, the UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and other bodies that came out of that particular group. There is within the United Nations what we call the Security Council. Now, the Security Council is made up of 14 members that are elected on there from time to time, but there are 5 permanent members of that council. They call them P5. And these are the US, of course, France, UK, and China, and of course, Russia. And you can understand Russia getting there because, anyway, that they were with the West when the Second World War was being fought, although they broke off and formed the Soviet Union and captured countries and all that, but that's a different thing. Okay, so these 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, there are resolutions, decisions that have to be made from time to time of a global nature by the members sitting on the Security Council. Some of these resolutions that they come up with from time to time are far-reaching, especially for particular countries. For example, when the war broke out when Russia attacked Ukraine unjustly, the matter came to the United Nations Security Council and was discussed. And of course, well, let me just back up first. All 5 permanent members have what we call the power of the veto. So if there is something that comes before the Council, a resolution that comes before the Security Council, acting on behalf of the entire United Nations body, that any of these members don't like, these members that I just called, US, France, UK, China, and Russia, if a matter comes a decision to be made on it and for them to vote on it, the 13 of that council can vote, but one of these permanent members can veto without having to give any explanation the vote. It's remarkable that this kind of thing has continued for so long without reform. And I'm going to say 1 or 2 ways in which probably we should reform it. But one only has to say no, and the work of the 13, or let's say of the 14, since that one would have been part of what was discussed, would be zilch. And to give you a point, as I was saying earlier, when Russia attacked Ukraine unjustly, it came to the Security Council for discussion. And Russia was reprimanded, and a decision was taken and asking them to withdraw from the country. And of course, what do you think Russia would do? Say yes, vetoed it. As a matter of fact, the country that has done more vetoes of the permanent 5 is Russia, over 300 times, up to about at least up to about 5 years ago, I understand. I might not be too right on the 5, but up to 300 times. The second country that has done the most vetoes is the US. And I'm not going to characterize the morality of the decision on each of these occasions, except to say that for Russia, who attacked another country, killed so many people in that, destroyed property, it was unwarranted that that Putin could get away without being reprimanded by the international community, which is what the Security Council sought to do. But zilch, he vetoed it, and it stood. How this sort of thing can continue boggles the mind. And so there are many people who have been arguing that the United Nations, this permanent 5 clause should be amended, and that they should have the ability, for example, to expel any of those members. But how that would work is that they would have to come up with a resolution to expel. And then here it is, the one that you're trying to expel will veto that decision. So they're in a bind, in a way. But it is not a bind that you cannot get out of. At the very least, I would suggest that there ought to be a caveat, some conditionality placed on the operation of these 5. And I would see it in terms of if there is a far-reaching humanitarian that there are certain things that should be excused from this veto power. That if the 14 or the 13 come up and decide that there's a far-reaching humanitarian crisis that the world has to respond to, such as the attack in Ukraine, that should be off the table. It should not be the remit of any of the 5 to veto. They should have no power over far-reaching humanitarian crises. Where a country has attacked another and is carrying out what we would call a destruction of the way of life of those people, referred to as genocide. You want to erase that a particular race or ethnicity off the face of the earth. That should be off limits to the 5. Once the majority decide, that should stand in respect to these particular matters. And you could look at other things, but I'm just thinking of these 2, a far-reaching humanitarian crisis and anything having to do with genocide. A country cannot be the architect of genocide and then have the ability to veto any resolution that raps him on the wrist, that reprimands him. That's nonsense. And at the very least, if you can remove the 5 yet, and you should find some mechanism in which you can remove any member of it, or probably do away with the whole permanent 5 arrangement altogether. Because to tell you frankly, I don't know to what extent it has worked for the benefit of the world. America has used it in recent times in the war with Gaza. And I think that some of the ways in which the veto power, when the Security Council came up with sanctions, wanted to sanction Israel's behavior in Gaza, America has vetoed the resolution, if not 2 resolutions, I think, that came before the body, the Security Council. So don't think it is all about Russia or China or any of the others. The others have been very quiet. I've not heard France or the United Kingdom, vetoing anything. China has done it, but to a lesser extent. But Russia and America, man, they have been culprits, let me put it that way. Russia more so than America in vetoing resolutions of a high moral quality. Why? because of their relationship with a particular country. I don't think if they were not bound to that kind of relationship with a particular country, they would have done it. But there you have it. You ask for a ceasefire, or you ask for a new direction, or ask for an ending of the war, the killing of innocent people, and you veto that. Give me a break. So this is what I'm saying, friends. At the very least, there should be some caveat, some condition placed that certain things are off limits. Put those aside. None of you can veto any resolution pertaining to those two things: humanitarian crisis and genocide. And you can add others, but those are my two. Until we can find a way to probably take the clause out or modify it in some way in which you can expel people from it. So I thought about that when Biden gave his last speech there today. And I think it is something that should be returned to and be taken on board very quickly, because this world is spinning out of control in so many ways. The whole place, I don't know, friends, but there's never been a time, well, one could talk about the Second World War and all that sort of thing, but so many wars breaking out around the place, so many skirmishes. You have Sudan, you have groups in militant groups in Africa. Africa is being taken over by warlords. You have, again, now in Colombia, the guerrillas asserting themselves, breaking away from the truce that was gained by one of the presidents. And now you have the Middle East, and you have Russia, and you have the South China Sea soon coming back in play. This world is in turmoil, and we need the UN. It has been a force for good, still is a force for good, but it is in urgent need of reform. And I hope they get to it sooner than later. All right, now to the second concern that I have is the silence of civil society in the wake of this year's presidential election in the US here. We have never had, at least in our living memories, a presidential candidate of the ilk of Trump. One may say, well, you're on Trump, and probably you hate the man or something like that. No, I don't hate Trump. I detest his ways. I detest his policies. I detest how he degrades human beings. I detest the ways in which he's a stranger to all things that are truthful. Those are the things I detest about him. So it's not a matter of hatred. Hatred is too heavy a burden to bear. And I could never bear that burden for Trump. I can tell you that, friends. And you shouldn't bear it for him or anybody else. So if you have any hatred in your heart against anybody, you better try to settle your differences with that person, because it will consume you like a cancer that starts inside of you and eats out the inside of you. So that is never a positive emotion to have. It may make your testosterone run more freely than it ought, and you may feel that you're big and bad because you are like, you can take on the world. But let me tell you something. Humble yourself. But what concerns me about Trump in the way in which he has been behaving, and you notice that when he goes on the campaign trail, he gets worse and worse and worse in the things that he says. Just this week, he was out there talking about that he's going to round up immigrants, legal or illegal. And when he talks about legal immigrants, they're not talking about the white. Let's be very frank about it. He's not talking about the white Caucasians. He's talking about brown people. He's talking about black people. He's talking about Latin Americans and blacks coming from other parts of the world. People who are not Caucasian. He's talking about Asians. Haitians, yes, but Asians, Southeast Asia and all that. That's what he's talking about. So when I was here last time, I wonder about the ways in which he can exercise power from day one, as he says, as a dictator from day one. And as I said, one of the things that he could do is to, and he has said it, he said he's going to return to the policy of excluding people from the country, like he started out with the Arabs and certain countries that were named. No, he's going to have a lot more countries, because the whole idea is to, cleanse America, as he said, of these vermins. So when it comes to immigration, one should have no doubt what he means when he says he's going to detain people, round them up, and send them out of the country. You may say, oh, he can't do that. It's going to be so chaotic. That's what he loves. Oh, he can't do that. He's just talking. Oh, yes? There was a time when I thought that he might not be able to do it, but not since the Supreme Court said that, gave him, if he should get back into power, would give him carte blanche power to do what he's saying. There was a time when I thought that no president in this country could do such arbitrary nonsense. But no, it's no longer nonsense. It's a reality if he gets back in there, because the Supreme Court has said that anything that he does in the context of his official duties, and official duties to be defined, is not criminal. So he can carry out all kinds of actions that you think are illegal, and they're not actually illegal, according to the Supreme Court definition of the office holder and his powers. So people better wake up and think, and that is why, I'm so concerned that so many people are silent. Civil society is silent. The church is silent, against the background of the worst and most egregious statements that come from Trump's mouth. There are so many people in the church who are quiet and silent. Just a few of us. I'm a clergyman, and I have no problem about talking out. Yes, I can understand that some people are fearful, because that's one of the things that these strong men drive in people's hearts. Fear. Fear to get you to bend to their will. Fear so that you don't criticize them. Fear so that you do what they want you to do. So I'm not saying that everybody's going to be jumping out there and, challenging Trump and saying things like I'm saying here. But for God's sake, man, if you're a leader in the church, if you are the presiding bishop of the Anglican Episcopal Church, if you're the leader of the Methodist, if you are bishops within the Roman Catholic Church, and you see the country going as it is, and this man spewing all this hatred and revenge and retribution language, and you can't say anything about it, and you say you're leading people, you're leading a flock, where you're leading them to? Oh, you're angry. Yes, I'm angry. I'm irate at it. And the silence that I hear, it is deafening. We're just under 45 days or so from the elections. And yet it is so close. It boggles the mind to think that somebody of that caliber could be really neck and neck with somebody who, from all indications, is competent, decent, at least not saying the things that this man is saying. And yet there is no uproar from civil society, the church, other groups within the society, like the business class. I know that the business class, many inside the business class support him, and they support him for their reason. But what they're blind to, they're willing not to blind their eyes, shut their eyes to what is happening because they believe that if Trump gets in there, their bread will be more buttered than it is right now. But they may find that it is hard to get butter, much less to find bread. If Trump gets in there and comes with his tariffs and the nonsense that is spewed. But there are people over there that back him and are in his corner. We're in a democratic country. Thank God we're still democratic. So people can join forces with whoever they want. But I think the church is in a more sticky situation because you just can't just get up and say that, boy, you're going to join forces with who you want. You must join forces consistent with your um, interior moral understanding of the issue, drawn from your faith, from your belief. But there's another angle to it too. And it has to do with the Republican Party. I talked about this to an extent last time. The Republican Party, they're blaming the Republican Party for foisting this person onto the country. It was long in making because the Republican Party didn't start to crater just when Trump came on the scene. It had started to do that long before. That there was developing inside of it a kind of rigidity, a situation where people did not, who were willing to suspend their moral compass to accommodate almost anything. I remember the Grover Norquist, you remember him when he came out with this tax thing and had Republicans signing onto it. And if you did not sign, they would primary that person and people just line up to sign. No tax. Even if the situation merited it, no tax. You remember that? And that was all the way back. I think in 2006 and before. So now today that these kind of rigidities were emerging in the Republican Party, and now it is in full flower under Trump. So what Trump did was to take over, in a sense, a kind of carcass of the party and mold it in his own image. Now it is MAGA. But you know what I find very frustrating? Perhaps not so much frustrating, but annoying, is that there could be senators in that party, especially the younger ones who should know better. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, to name a few. And yet now the older heads who really should know better, who are just quiet. See no evil, hear no evil, speak none. Quiet. And they know deep down in their hearts that what Trump is trumpeting is the kind of division and divisiveness that can tear asunder the fabric of this country. And they are willing to be quiet and to go along with it so as to perpetuate themselves in power, to ingratiate themselves to Trump. Some people say it's fear. I don't think it is so much fear. Trump is a coward. You'd have to fear him. But these guys have become cowards because they're afraid to stand up and to be counted because they want to ingratiate themselves to him to get power. That's the bottom line. That's why they don't attack him. And that is why I've said on this broadcast over and over again, friends, that is why the Republican Party is a danger to this country. Because when people are willing to suspend their best judgments and their own moral center to fit into a grid of holding on to power or attaining power, no matter what, no matter what the country may be thrown into, then we are in serious trouble. And that's what I'm concerned about. Many of these guys don't even realize that they have young children or they have grandchildren for the older ones. That they're going to have to live in this country. When Trump begins to carry out, and if you think he's not going to do it, you have something else coming. The Project 2025, when the contours of that are rolled out. And as I told you the last time, and he's going to be signing, he's going to be signing executive orders on steroids. He'll make sure he boosts himself up so he has his strength so that he can sign. It will be I predict that if he gets in there, and God forbid he does, but if he does get in there, it will be executive orders on steroids. While at the same time diminishing the legitimacy of the pardon powers that he would have as dictator, made so underlined and supported by his people on the Supreme Court. Let's be frank about it. So that's what we face. And if this doesn't bother well-thinking Americans, then I don't know what else can ever bother you. What I find really now disturbing and frustrating is that there are so many people who are willing to bend their knees to Baal, or Bahal, if you want to call him that. It's amazing that so many people can buy into the hogwash that flows at Trump's campaigns. Oh, I love women, and it's gonna be, you're all gonna be all right. I'll take care of you. I will make sure that IVF is paid for you because we want to have beautiful children. And there's a snickering and a laugh there. Or when it derides people, people laugh. There's a thing called the tyranny of an idea. And that's when an idea you accommodate a particular idea to the point that it becomes a part of you and it takes over your life. It depersonalizes you. It takes away your capacity to think. And so when you hear the most horrible things that you should denounce, it doesn't sound that horrible because the ideology, the idea that you have bought into that has become a tyranny over your life, has totally consumed you, or at least it's on the way to consuming you. And, I think that's where a lot of Americans who support Trump are. And it's very pathetic that that should be so. Because what people do in those instances is to suspend or to do away with their sense of dignity and personhood. And you should never lose that because it defines who you are. So yes, I'm concerned. And I hope that you are too. Because we're heading in a direction that if that kind of ideology should prevail, I can tell you, now putting on my prophetic hat, I can tell you that America would have been irreparably changed. And I'm going to add, for the worse. All right. So on that note, I'm going to end. I'm going to thank you for joining me this evening. And I've been looking into the matter of addiction because that's a scourge on this nation. And I want to do probably a more fulsome discussion on that on this program. I don't know exactly when that will come yet, but I will let you know ahead of time. But it is a real scourge, and it's something that we need to talk about. Fentanyl is destroying this country, at least the young people in this country. I was watching a clip, just quickly. I was watching a clip on CNN, I think last Sunday. And they were saying that every week, a whole classroom, and by that they don't mean a literal classroom, but 14 kids, young people are killed by fentanyl in this country. So multiply the 14 by 52. And you see what we're talking about. It's a real problem. So we will talk about it. So let me thank you for joining me then. And as I said, you might not have watched the program, but I hope that I mean live, but it's gonna be up on the channel. So just go there, click live, share it, subscribe if you have not yet done so. And let's spread the news. Let's get it out there. If you think that what I'm saying is worthy of another person's ear, then pass it on. I guess if you don't think, then you might not do it. But I urge you to do it anyway, because how you see it might not be how another man sees it. He may benefit from it, even if you don't. Just be open. All right, so let me thank you for joining me, and I wish for you a good rest of the night. And ask you that whatever you do, all good. Bye-bye.